Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Batstone, NASCAR Sky, and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back, race fans, to another episode of Mash the Gas podcast. We are thrilled to kick off the 2026 season at full strength. We've got NASCAR Sky in her second full-time season, long-running host Jeff Davis, and myself, Kevin Batstone, bringing you all the premier Cup Series action week in and week out. Season starts here in Daytona. NASCAR Sky was on the ground all weekend long, all weekend strong. So we're going to kick it to her right now. Sky, who mashed the gas the hardest this weekend?
Definitely got to give it to Tyler Reddick and that 45 team. I mean, such an amazing thing to win. The Daytona 500, 23XI, I mean, to win is just so cool. And it's cool for Denny as well. But definitely Tyler Reddick mashed the gas the hardest this weekend.
Yeah, it was good for him because, he had a winless season of 2025. We talked about it quite a bit, the three of us last year. It's like, I don't know, Tyler Reddick, is he going to make it? Is he going to do it? And it was really cool to see him get that win, like I said, for a 2311 and Michael Jordan there hoisting that trophy. And we've also talked about the only lap that matters is the very last lap. He led one single lap, and that's the lap that counts, Kevin.
I mean, typical Daytona, right? I mean, this one definitely ended in a quicker fashion, I would say. I mean, I know NASCAR moved this race up an hour, which was the right move because they just dodged the rain, but the race just felt like it went quicker than normal. We didn't see a ton of wrecks at the end. We didn't have a chance to go to overtime. There was a chance for NASCAR to throw the caution there on that white flag lap. I'm glad that they didn't let these guys race it out. Felt bad for Chase Elliott. He was in the catbird seat getting ready to let it rip there. You mentioned 2311. Those guys are coming in with a lot of steam this year, bringing on, going to a four-car team now, hoisting their first Harley J Earl Trophy. I mean, that's just big doings for these guys. Big for Reddick. We mentioned last year his career kind of struggled a little bit. Bubba Wallace with a P10 there always runs good on these super speedways. But these guys are coming out of the gate swinging, showing the Toyotas are here to play.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a good season for them. It's still early to tell, but I feel like the Toyotas have always been strong and definitely strength in numbers, for sure. I agreed. It went very quick. I mean, being there, it definitely went quick. I felt like it was probably the quickest Daytona compared to last year, for sure. I was there probably 8-9 hours all day with the rain. But I was wondering how the racing would play out with the new chase format because it's no longer like a race-to-race thing. Like, oh, if I wreck this week, it's fine because next week I can try again, because of that win in your end being gone. So I was thinking that probably played into the effect, especially with the drivers a lot. I mean, me being a Logano fan, seeing him finish, like, I feel like he was hanging around the back. It wasn't typical Logano super speedway type racing. I could tell that I think a lot of drivers have shifted their focus in realizing that, you can't make these boneheaded moves. You have to finish the race. You have to get the points. You have to finish the race or you're going to have no chance, and at the end of the season for a championship.
Yeah, the ending was just classic, though. I mean, seeing Logano finish completely sideways and seeing Chase Elliott finish directly backwards, ass end first was pretty darn funny. But overall, yeah, I thought it was a pretty good race for a super speedway race. And, like Kevin brought up a minute ago about, 2311 with a four-car team. It's weird seeing that, just watching this race. I'm so used to just, Tyler Reddick and Bubba being out there, but having Corey Heim and Riley Herbst out there. It's going to be a good season for them, I think. I mean, they finished pretty darn well overall with a P1, a P8, P10. Corey Heim was the worst at P28. So overall, they did a really good job. And as we know, winning this race is what really makes the year for your team and for your sponsors and just the money you receive. And I know we've pounded this in a lot last year as well, but as far as the money that is gone into these races, as far as the Daytona 500 being the biggest check of all, the Cup race had over $31 million distributed between all the drivers and teams. Whereas when you look at the O'Reilly Auto Parts series, which was the Xfinity series, they were allotted that 3.7 million, and then the trucks were only 1.2 million, split between all those teams. Of course, depending on where you finish is how much you receive. And again, it goes to say that, man, we need to give a little bit more, I think, to the Xfinity series and these truck guys just to make sure they can keep running.
Well, and you bring up a good point. Since we kind of all last visited in November, We, of course, had the 2311 lawsuit get finalized. NASCAR came to a settlement. They really didn't want a lot of stuff getting out. The purpose was a little bit more rev share that we're going to see from media, the purses, all of that. And so for 2311 to come out and win the first points race of the year, I find that kind of ironic. It's kind of like, hey, NASCAR, we told you we're here to race. We're here to win races. So, I mean, good for those guys. Really exciting for Tyler Reddick. Can they carry this momentum into Atlanta, very super speedway style track and repeat that success? And then we had our typical super speedway guys up there. I took Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in fantasy. He ran around the back the first two stages, was 35th all day, stayed away from the mess, made a run there at the end like he always does, right? Michael McDowell got that late race caution there and tried to stretch it before Hocevar, old Hurricane Hocevar and them, wiped out the front of the field. But I kind of agreed with Ryan Blaney's point a little bit in this race, in that super speedway racing has become a little bit of a fuel economy 500. And that, look, they got to play the hand that they're dealt. I understand that, but 60%, 70% throttle, trying to limp it to these stages. We saw the 41 of Cole Custer run out of gas, which brought, I think it was all the Toyotas first, followed by the Chevys and the Fords pitting together. That's nothing new. But it just seems like there's so much fuel mileage racing that goes into these super speedway racings. It kind of takes away from that old racing at 100% rule that was implemented years ago. Curious to what your guys' thoughts is on this fuel mileage racing.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying, but I just feel like, this has always been around, fuel racing. I mean, not to the extent that it is now that we see it, but fuel mileage racing has always been a thing. Or saving fuel. I can remember Mark Martin in '09. He was going on that stretch. I think one of the first races he won is because two people in front of him ran out of gas. This is not something I think is necessarily new, but I can agree that it makes it boring for sure. When you're sitting at a race all day and you're just watching them kind of single file, like, I don't know how much they can do unless you just say you have to raise 100%, but then you're kind of cutting into strategy. I feel like it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a tough subject. I feel like it definitely can be fixed, or at least maybe made a little better, but I feel like it's always going to be around,
It definitely will. But to get on, what kind of Kevin was talking about with the 12 car, Ryan Blaney was pretty, not really upset, but you could see his disappointment when he was being interviewed about it, saying, here you got we're pack racing, we're three wide, and you've got guys that are saving fuel at the very front, which is not allowing anybody to gain any positions. And he says it kind of messed with the racing, is what he was kind of getting to the point on it. And I see what he's trying to say. Back in the day when, like Kevin was talking about a minute ago, remember when Dale Jr., no matter where he started on super speedways, he would sit there and just drop back to the very end until about halfway through the race. And then he'd start kind of actually punching it through and kicking it in. But fuel strategies are always going to be a part of every single race. It's just interesting the way that they're doing it on super speedways like this.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. Really, the catalyst here is stage racing, and I'm not advocating that we get rid of stages, but we know when you're going to have opportunities to pit. We saw it with 60-60. We kind of splitting those stages in half. Cole Custer obviously cut it up short there, but it's just interesting how that front 3 lanes, 2 lanes, however wide we get, really can determine the rest of the field's pace. We saw 52-second lap times, and then we saw 47-second lap times. So 5-second swing based on how hard we're racing, 10 to go. That's a lot of varying lap times there throughout the race. So you see the leader speed and go, oh, they're definitely saving fuel. Could Michael McDowell have made it running full throttle with 10 to go had that caution not have come out? We'll never know. And once again, I'm glad that NASCAR didn't throw that caution late and let those guys race to the end, or we wouldn't have had Tyler Reddick in victory lane. I think it would have fallen more into the lap of Chase Elliott. So I don't know what your vantage point was on that, Sky, as they came around, wrecking down into turn 1 and then racing back to the checkered. Coming off turn 4, it looked like Chase Elliott had this thing in the bag.
Yeah, it definitely did. I don't remember much because, Logano was up front and I was definitely had a lot of adrenaline. But I don't know. I'm glad with NASCAR in general. I think that it's going to be a good season for a lot of the things you brought up. Back to stage racing, maybe not necessarily getting rid of it, but we've already seen some big changes this year. Them moving Daytona up. How long have fans been saying that? Like, rain is, we know how Florida is. We know how Florida weather gets. Them doing that, them, changing the format. I feel like they can maybe do something with the stage racing and maybe make it I don't know what exactly you could maybe modify to kind of make it better and maybe help all these little other things that stage racing is causing. But I definitely feel like NASCAR, at least this year, and maybe it's because, their leadership has changed or whatever. They seem more open. So I definitely feel like there is potential to have something there with the changing of stage racing and the caution. I agree. I'm so happy they didn't throw it. It was a really hard hit for Chase Elliott, and it's unfortunate because, he was a dual winner. I feel like he definitely had a good chance, but I'm glad that they just let him race back to the line, with it being just kind of like right there.
Yeah, let them race for sure. And I agree with you. I think we're headed in the right direction. I mean, this is, since we were all together at the championship in Phoenix, when we were all kind of, knowing something was going to change, we just didn't know what was going to change. I think there's a lot of optimism. I mean, you heard it in Mark Martin's voice in the offseason and Dale Earnhardt Jr., guys that have been advocating for this chase format that's come back. Jeff and I kind of touched on it a little bit 2 weeks ago during the week of the Clash. We're headed in the right direction for sure. NASCAR is listening. I think Steve O'Donnell is definitely so far at the helm doing a really good job of trying to restore, kind of that old school racing value into the sport of NASCAR. They tried the stage racing, they tried the playoff format with eliminations and different things, and it just wasn't stacking up. And so we kind of analyzed, well, who does this play into the hand of long term? And I kind of feel like the driver that finishes the regular season in the top 3 to 5 is going to have the best chance to win the chase. I just don't see how a driver can come in 16th, 15th, 14th in points and go out and win the chase. That's going to be very, very difficult to do.
You say that, but you know what immediately comes to my mind, with this chase format, and this is like one issue that I kind of have with it. Think back, I think it was 2011, Carl Edwards and Tony Stewart. I mean, Carl Edwards had that in the bag, and Tony lights it up the second half of the year or whatever, and completely just goes out and beats Carl. And that's one of the things where I feel like we're always going to have issues with whatever format is in place, unless you do like a full season. And the only kind of issue you have there is maybe fans will think it's boring, but I feel like that's the only way to determine like a full champion. The chase format, I just get a little, I don't know. I'm definitely here for it. I'm here that it's no longer the playoffs. I just don't know how long that's, we're going to like that.
And I like the way you brought up Carl Edwards there, because that was such a disappointment to me as well, because he did so well throughout the entire season. And then, smoke just got super hot during the chase playoffs and, won 6 races, I believe. Is that right? Won 6 races and literally tied with Carl Edwards. But because he had the most wins during the playoffs, that's what gave him the win. But it was really disappointing to see Carl Edwards, retire just immediately, coming out pretty much on top, basically, without the actual win, of course. But yeah, and another thing that I bring up Carl Edwards, another thing that reminds me of, you guys at the end, remember seeing Ryan Preece coming backwards all the way across the finish line? And he said, he's like, I did it just because I wanted to finish the race. When he did that, it totally reminded me of Carl Edwards back in Talladega. And I think that was in 2009 as well, when Brad Keselowski hooked him on the last lap at Talladega. One of the worst wrecks I've ever seen. And Edwards gets out of his car and literally jogs across the finish line. But that just made me laugh.
I do remember that. Yeah, that's back when Brad Keselowski was running for, I think it was James Finch in the '09. And that's when the Edwards and Keselowski rivalry started. But, to Sky's point, you can absolutely, go lights out and win 5 out of the 10 chase races. I think all 3 of us know how difficult that is going to be, to accomplish, whether it's an elimination race or not. It's very tough to win in this series and at this cup level and in this next gen car. And I think that's why I like the new points format as well, with, awarding a little bit more for winning, having the seeding the way it is, that the number 1 seed gets an automatic 25-point advantage over second place. I think all the way down to, basically from 1st to 16th, it's a 100-point swing, once we get to the start of the chase. So, and rightfully so, I think you should award your regular season champion, that advantage. And all season long, these wins are going to stack up. That's the idea, is we want to continue to reward winning.
Kevin, you bring up a really good point, because I think with point system now and the next gen car that we're in is going to be completely different from the past when we've seen it. So I think that's going to be a huge differential. And someone I really wanted to throw out a little bit of props to, man, was just RFK in general. I mean, they really had a great showing. Brad Keselowski's first top 5 finish in the Daytona 500 since 2014. So, I mean, it's been 12 years since he's got a top 5 finish. So to see him and then Chris Buescher getting a P7, pretty good start for RFK in general.
Yeah, it's crazy that you say that, Jeff, because that's literally what I was about to bring up was how good RFK did. I was really proud of Brad. I mean, I was for a second I thought he might end up winning the race. Um, I made the joke that he might have a 2015 Kyle Busch year, maybe. You know, we brought the chase format back. I think what? He might be the only driver to win under that on the championship, I think, that's currently racing right now, if I'm not wrong, or
Yeah,
something similar, I guess.
yeah, because we can't count Jimmy Johnson on his part-time schedule. So yeah, BK, that was 2012 when he was running for Penske.
So, hey, guys, I don't know. Maybe this is Brad Keselowski's year.
Yeah, and I thought he's going to have a hard time after breaking his leg on the ski trip that he did just 2 months ago and coming back out there. I mean, you saw him there, when they were doing the national anthem and everything. He was walking with a cane, and I was wondering if that was going to kind of hinder his driving. And just watching the race in general, I was like, maybe it is hurting him because of where he's at right now. And then you saw him kind of march up to the front. And Sky, you're right. I was like, man, he could actually pull this thing off. That would be amazing. So yeah, again, really good job for those guys so far. Another interesting fact I found, as far as this weekend went with the duels and the Daytona 500, was Josh Berry in the 21 car was the only car out of all of them that didn't get caught up in some sort of fashion or of a wreck or a spin or any damage on his car. He was the only one that made it unscathed through the entire weekend.
That's not something that everybody can say at Daytona, no question about it. I mean, we saw a lot of torn up race cars, whether it was in the duels, whether it was practice, whether it was whatever. I mean, that's Daytona. We're going to tear up race cars. Who I did feel bad for, though, was Anthony Alfredo going back into those duels. I mean, he was so excited to be able to transfer in, and then, they come back and say, well, the car is disqualified because of a transaxle cooling line, which was not appealable because the duels aren't considered a race. It's considered a qualifying format. Then he goes out and misses his qualifying order in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series, but they were nice enough to let him hop into the 4 car. So, kind of an up and down weekend for those guys.
Yeah, for sure. And another up and down, well, really just a down weekend. Carson Hocevar. I mean, for a second, I was like, how many wrecks has one driver been in one weekend? Because I was convinced that Carson might break that record. He was doing really well in the 500, and then, like we said, he good old hurricane. I can't exactly remember what happened. I don't know totally if it was his fault or not. But either way, he was caught up in it, and it's unfortunate for him. I do think that he's one driver I think is going to get it this year. I think he'll get his first win before good old Ty Gibbs.
I would agree with that. I think if you'd asked me that a year ago, I don't know if I would have, but I think he's got the talent and he's always up front, runs well at a lot of different styles of racetracks. And going back to Brad Keselowski in that situation, both him and Riley Herbst disagreed severely on what happened. I mean, I don't know if you guys caught his post-race remarks, but Brad said it was the stupidest move he's ever seen be made. And, when you look at it, it was very similar to what Justin Allgaier did earlier in the race, where it's just an aggressive block coming across the nose, straight into the wall, wrecks the field. Obviously Brad Keselowski still comes home with a decent finish, but to Sky's point, he was charging there late, and I think he could have made a run. I mean, BK is a great super speedway racer, and I think he's going to carry a lot of that experience and momentum into Atlanta and be an early favorite.
Yeah, you're right. He was pretty ticked off at Riley Herbst. He said, there was no way he had a chance of blocking my run. Very, very stupid move. But that's part of the racing. Couple other cool things I wanted to bring up was just talking about this year in general for the Daytona 500. We had 25 different leaders, which is a record. We had 65 lead changes, which is the second most of all time, and only 5 cautions. So that was tied for the fewest since 2005. Just some really cool stats coming out of this weekend. Again, overall, I thought it was a really good race for a super speedway racing. But Sky, I wanted to ask you something because I know on the third lap, everyone held up their, number 3, put up those 3 fingers, and they said the stands were completely silent. And they did it on TV. Obviously I wasn't there, and all I could hear was the motors, but they said the crowd was just completely silent. What did you experience on that, Sky?
No, yeah, it was. I've never heard Daytona that quiet. It was an incredible thing, especially to be a part of. But yeah, I mean, you could have. All you heard was the cars, honestly. And most of the time when they're on the other side of the track, it was just eerily quiet. It was such a cool thing. I mean, to honor him on the third lap, because he's just so important. Just his entire story is just so important with Daytona. So that's always good. I wanted to go back to what Brad said. It's funny to me. Like, I get what he's saying. I get it. He's older now. He's a veteran. But, Brad, how many bad pushes have you done in your life at a super speedway? How many dumb moves have you made to wreck the field? I mean, he's a young kid. It is what it is, And Justin Allgaier, I was gutted for him. And I know that he felt so bad. I'm pretty sure they showed his in-car and he was like crying. And I don't know. I felt bad. And it definitely was just not a smart move in general. I know that it's easy to sit here and get on a podcast and say what you can do or what you should have or shouldn't have done. But I don't know. I did just feel bad for him, and it sucks that it just ended the way that it did. But with all those stats, I mean, to me, that just kind of brings back to my point that I brought up, that I feel like the drivers' mindsets have really changed. And I'm really, really excited about that this year. If they can really get rid of the whole, you can't make these dumb moves on these racetracks, not just the super speedway, just in general. You can't make these dumb moves. You can't risk, wrecking someone else or doing something, because you have to finish. So I'm hoping everybody's mindset has shifted, and it's just, I don't know. I'm really excited for this season.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It is going to change the long-term strategy, because there is no, we'll just deal with it next week. Now it's accumulative points. We got to get back to points racing, something that, I grew up around in the Jeff Gordon era. Good points days are going to matter, and they're going to pay off when we get to the chase. There's no question about it. But what I'd also say is it's still going to take us a couple weeks for us to analyze where we're really at, right? We got to get through Atlanta, super speedway style racing, get through COTA. We go to a road course. Congratulations to SVG in the 97. I'm already giving it to them. And then we get to Phoenix, where we get to really try out this new horsepower package on a 1 mile track. And that's where I think we're going to be able to get our fingers around where we're at.
It's going to be great. I can't wait to get on a short track and see the 750 horsepower out there. But that kind of back to Sky's point a minute ago about, Justin Allgaier in that 40 car. And that car just looked so great. I thought it was one of the coolest paint schemes that they had, or wraps, it was really cool. But yeah, you could just see he was disappointed in himself when that happened and wrecking the field. Very unfortunate. But it was cool to see, Kelly Miller Earnhardt and, Chris Stapleton and all those guys sitting there up on the box, but just a really disappointing day for him.
Yeah. Kevin, I just want to say, you can't give it to SVG so early. We got Connor in the series this year.
Kevin, yeah.
Yeah,
Hey.
like we got to. I think that Connor is going to give him a run for his money.
We're ganging up on Kevin Sky.
Well, I mean, they're teammates.
They are teammates, and I mean, they got that equipment is pretty good equipment. I'm excited to see that. But all that being said, though, that means Ross Chastain better perform this year, because you got two really good drivers. I mean, SVG minimum is guaranteed to win at least one race. I mean, he's going to win at least one, if not all of the road courses. So I interested in Ross Chastain. I don't think that he's necessarily bad. I think Ross will probably have a good year this year. But I think it is so funny, Kevin, that you bring up good points days, because I remember the fans complaining when drivers would say, "Oh, it's a good points day. It's a good points day." Fans would get so mad. This is what I mean. Like, I don't know. I'm definitely going to let the chase format play out 100%. But I'm just not sure it's the right answer, if I'm being honest. I think that we are just blinded by how much we hated the playoffs, or how bad the playoffs were at determining a champion, that we see this and we're like in a honeymoon phase. But again, I might be speaking too soon. It might all work out and everything might be okay.
And like we were talking, every format, no matter what format it is, there's going to be flaws in it, and people are going to find it. They're going to complain about it, and nothing's ever going to be perfect. I mean, this weekend in fantasy, I was just hoping for a solid top 10. I got a solid top 10 finish, huh, Kevin?
Out of 12 competitors.
Exactly. So I had a good points day.
Well, and that's, and to Sky's point, yes, I think we're in the right direction. I don't know if the chase is going to be the answer yet either, but I can tell you I already like the sounds of it a lot better than where we were with the playoff format. That said, if we look at, and we talked about this last year when we closed the year out, Christopher Bell would have been our points champion had we have had the chase format last year, which would have changed everything based on the consistency aspect of it. Of course, that wasn't considering the plus 15 points now that drivers get for the win, so that might have been skewed a little bit differently. That was more based off of the old chase format. So I don't feel like this format is going to give Denny Hamlin his best shot at a championship. And I think he agrees with that, even though Denny has advocated for this style of racing. I think he'd be the first to admit that it slipped away from him last year in that format. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe Denny goes out there and pulls, a Tony Stewart and wins 5 out of the 10 in the chase. It's too soon to tell.
Yeah, and we really didn't hear old Seabell's name throughout pretty much the first half of the race at all, man. Even towards the end, until he finally kind of got up there in the top 10 for a little bit. He just didn't have a very good week this week, this weekend. But we know how well he did at Atlanta. So he took first place in Atlanta, and old Hurricane Hocevar, and maybe that's a Florida thing, Sky, because you're down there in Hurricane area. But Carson Hocevar took P2 in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think Carson is a really good pick for Atlanta now that we're getting onto that. I think that, another surprise person might be Daniel Suarez. I was a little bit, the first half of the Daytona 500, I was a little bit unimpressed with him. And granted, I was on pit road, so I wasn't hearing everything that was being said by the commentator. I don't know what his issues were. I knew that he was up and down pit road a few times because he was actually right next to Joey Stahl, so I seen him a few times on pit road. But, I mean, he finished what? Top 10, top 15. He finished 13th. He's already won at Daytona or at Atlanta, 2 years ago. I don't know. He's probably another strong competitor or another strong pick. Kyle Busch too. I mean, he came out pretty strong to start this season. I'm not sure where he finished. He probably got caught up in a wreck or something. It's so bad when you're at a race. I feel like you never know where anybody finishes except for the people you care about, I guess. But I don't know. I think that there's a couple good, strong contenders, but it also, it's Atlanta, so anything could really happen.
Yeah, and Atlanta is just a unique racetrack in the sense that we're essentially super speedway racing on a mile and a half. So for folks that are kind of new to that track terminology, we just came off a 2.5 mile, iconic Daytona oval, and now we're going to shrink that by a mile and go to a mile and a half, which Jeff, as we know, is normally associated with Texas Motor Speedway, Charlotte, Las Vegas, Kansas, kind of the cookie cutter tracks, but not Atlanta. Since the reconfiguration with the banking, we now run the super speedway style package. We're definitely gonna get 2 wide. It's a little bit more difficult to get 3 wide there, like we saw at Daytona, but I think we're going to see it. I mean, you go back to that race 2 years ago that Daniel Suarez won, that Sky had mentioned. That was 3 wide. Kyle Busch was in the mix. So I think our typical super speedway racers are going to be in the conversation again this week.
Yeah, it's a very interesting track. Now that they, like I said, now that they did more banking, because it used to be 24% in the turns, 5% on straightaways, and then they boosted it up to 28% in the banking. So that's why we're going to see a lot more of the pack racing, like you mentioned, super speedway style of racing. I always like the track. Whether I don't know whether I like it better now or back when it was at 24% banking, because the super speedway racing and the pack racing is just such a different style that, again, it's almost like, as long as you don't get caught up, yeah, you got a really good chance of winning. And that's what we saw. There were 20 cars that got caught up in that last caution, took out, half the field pretty much. Man, this was it was a carnage fest. I still can't fathom the amount of money that comes out of all these cars being wrecked and torn up, because we know these cars are around 300,000 a piece. And I know that they didn't get totally wrecked, but when you add up all the money from all the carnage that we saw, that's a lot of funds going out.
Yeah, that's a good point. First, in case anyone that's listening is confused, I'm sure you're not, but EchoPark is what we're talking about. I know it's not really called Atlanta anymore, but that's where we're going next week. And I wanted to get your guys' opinion. What do you think about having these, obviously this not like a super speedway, but having these 2 super speedway races back to back like this? I don't know if I'm a big fan of it, if I'm being honest. I feel like maybe we could spread it out a little more, because like Jeff was saying, I mean, that's just 2 weeks straight. I mean, you're caught up in a wreck. That's 2 weeks straight that you're, paying a lot of money for some race cars.
Yeah, I think you and I agreed on this a lot last year, Sky, about we voiced our displeasure with just super speedway style racing. I mean, we know it's a fan favorite. It's exciting. It creates for, high intensity, 3 wide pack race. That's all I really heard out and about today. That for folks that aren't big NASCAR fans, man, those guys were just, it was exciting seeing that, and the wreck was coming. It's a specific style of racing for a specific type of race fan. I don't like that we opened the season with back-to-back super speedway styles. We used to, of course, go to the old Atlanta, which was a typical mile and a half configuration. Good call it now that it's the EchoPark Raceway, kind of like what Charlotte did with Lowe's Motor Speedway back in the day. And then we go to a road course right after that. And that's why I say until we get to Phoenix 4 weeks into the season, it's kind of an interesting way to start the year, Jeff.
Yeah, I agree with both of you on that. Having those races back to back, they need to spread them out. In my opinion, I'd like to see maybe Phoenix get in there somewhere in between, just because of the style of the track. We're not going to get to see really true racing and see how everything performs until we get out there to Phoenix. But overall, people love that race. On TV, people that don't watch much racing, the races that they do watch, they want to see that Daytona 500. Great American race. I thought it was kind of the Great American Crash Derby in a way. But, it's an interesting track. Pack racing is always exciting. It was interesting to see NASCAR finally put out the numbers on it. And Jeff Gluck, came out and was saying that there were over 150,000 people on the property for the Daytona 500, and over the entire weekend, there were 450,000 people over the weekend, which is wonderful as far as NASCAR goes and the attendance, the money that goes into the sport. But NASCAR hasn't released those type of attendance figures in probably over 10 years.
We're in a good spot right now. The sport is in a good place. We have a very, young and fresh fan base coming in. A lot of the old timers are still, regaining interest in the sport. And I think we have a lot to be optimistic about, throughout this season and beyond. And I think we're going to see some great racing. So, as we turn our attention here to the EchoPark Speedway weekend, we have a doubleheader, of course, on Saturday. Looks like Saturday there is a threat of weather. We'll see how much that affects practice and qualifying. And then Sunday, the weather looks better. Monday, even better than that. So regardless of what happens, we're going to get these races in. And so, we crunched some of these numbers going back to the spring race. Chase Elliott took it a year ago. Christopher Bell took it. We'd mentioned Carson Hocevar, Larson, Blaney, Stenhouse were up there in the top five. Brad Keselowski up there in the top five. So, fantasy-wise, I think you got to run your super speedway guys. Like I said, it's still too soon to get too aggressive with your heavy hitters that you're going to need later in the season. But who do you guys have for the win this weekend?
Well, I was kind of thinking I might take Sky's pick from her because she hasn't said it yet. I'm going to go with the 12 car Brian Blaney.
I don't have a single Penske guy picked, and I'm very glad because I thought you were going to pick my pick, and I was going to be very sad. I'm going to go with good old Hurricane. He's going to get his first win in Atlanta, Carson Hocevar.
Ooh, that's definitely an aggressive pick, but very realistic pick. I was kind of eyeing Michael McDowell in that 71 just because of how good not only himself but Spire has been on super speedway packages. But I'm going to go with the hometown boy, Mr. Chase Elliott, going to get his redemption from Daytona. Him and Alan Gufson are going to go out and get it done this weekend.
It's going to be a fun race. One thing, I just want real quick. I know we're running out of time here, but EchoPark, I don't want to see all these tracks getting named like football stadiums and baseball stadiums. We want to keep Bristol. We want to keep Texas Motor Speedway. I don't want to see it get all corporate on us.
I definitely agree, but that's just part of how it goes nowadays, I feel like. Take some pretty strong picks. I'm interested to see which one of us comes out on top, or if any of us come out on top.
Yeah, who knows? It could be Daniel Suarez again. I think it's definitely going to be a pretty even playing field going into EchoPark weekend here. Let's hope the weather cooperates. 400 miles, so that equates to 260 laps. We have that back straightaway pit road there off turn 3, kind of interesting when we get down to green flag pit stop. So we're going to have a lot of action to break down next Monday night right here. Mash the Gas. Follow us across the board on all social media platforms at Mash the Gas. Get in touch with Sky over there at NASCAR Sky. Keep in touch. We'll be back next week. Until then, y'all.
Mash the gas.